Alright YouTubers, how you diddling? This is the Disposalist, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about how to shoot your submachine guns. Now you can see I'm in a live Nivelle Nights map, and that's going to make things a little bit more interesting, but a little bit more difficult, so if my video's a tad choppy, it's because I just did something embarrassing that I didn't want you to see. And I started the video again. So the first thing to talk about is the same for all weapons, and that is sway. And you can see if I stand still and risks my life, that my gun there moves with the motion of my soldiers breathing. I can't hold it still because I'm not a robot. And if I'm aiming down the sights, you can see this effect most clearly. You can see that the red dot there, if I aim it at that star, is moving in a slow figure 8. It's actually an extended figure 8, kind of an M or a W. So that affects all weapons. Submachine guns are somewhat special because they are mostly short range. It's not going to affect them very much. With a scout, sniper rifle, sway is going to make a difference of several feet at long range, but at the ranges you're using your submachine gun, sway is not going to make much difference. So, moving on, I want to talk about spread. Now, spread is what we talk about in Battlefield 1 in the same breath as accuracy, but what it actually means is the innate inaccuracy of your weapon. And spread will cause every single bullet you fire to deviate from where you're aiming by a certain amount. You can see that those shots are not going where I'm aiming. At least they all weren't going to the same place. Now, what is special about the spread of a submachine gun? Well, it's amongst the worst in the game when you're aiming down the sights. Now, all weapons are better aiming down the sights accuracy-wise than when you are hip firing. When aiming down the sights, submachine guns are not impressive compared with other classes. But when hip firing, your spread compared to other class weapons is much better. So the way to look at it is submachine guns aren't very accurate, but they cope extremely well with the effects of hip firing, such that they are better than other weapons when you hip fire. Another thing that's special, spread-wise, accuracy-wise, for submachine guns is the effect that moving has on them, and that is to say, there is little effect, much less effect when you're moving with submachine guns than with other class weapons. Now, it's the same as all other weapons when you aim down the sight. It doesn't matter if you crouch, stand or go prone, your aim when you're down the sights is the same. That was a bit of a revelation to me when I found out, but yeah, aiming down the sights doesn't matter if you're standing, crouch or prone. When you're hip firing, it's better to be prone, better to be crouching than standing. Now, submachine guns again are a little special in this regard, in that they cope with movement better than other class weapons. Your difference when you're hip firing of moving is absolutely nothing unless you're standing, and then the effect of movement on your standing hip firing is less than any other class weapon, so it doesn't have much effect, certainly not as much as other classes have. And moving when you're aiming down the sights has much less effect than with other class weapons also. It does have an effect, just like any other weapon, but a lesser effect than you'd see with another class. The next thing to talk about is spread increase, and again, all weapons have this mechanic, but it's a little bit special with submachine guns. Spread increase means that every bullet you fire, not only does it deviate from your aim, but it also causes the spread to increase, just momentarily and just a fraction. But with submachine guns this is special because of course your rate of fire is generally quite high and you cannot control it. You hold your finger down and you get bullets spraying out of the end of your gun really very rapidly. Now what this means is that the spread increase occurs and cannot be recovered from before the next bullet is fired. So with submachine guns what you see is your aim gets worse and worse and worse until it reaches a maximum spread, which can be pretty bad. I will show you, I was hoping to get revived there, but I'll show you that effect it's reasonably obvious as soon as you start using submachine guns. If I aim at that flagpole there, you can see the first few bullets hit it, and then spread increases such that your bullets are flying either side of it. And that's when it reaches maximum spread. So you can see the effect of compound spread there on a submachine gun. Now, what you can do to mitigate this to a certain extent is fire in bursts if you're firing at range. You're going to have to assume that if you hold your finger down, your spread will increase to that maximum. And so you're going to have to be at the right range such that that wide spread doesn't matter and you're still hitting your target. Or you have to stop firing when your spread reaches an undesirable size and let your gun calm down just a fraction of a second and start firing again. So you fire in bursts in order to control the spread when you need some ranged ability. Now, that's not exactly straightforward, I hope you understood that, but there's one more wrinkle, I'm afraid, for submachine guns, and that is the mechanic of first shot multipliers. What you see with a submachine gun, it's difficult to see in practice, but what you have with a submachine gun is the recoil and spread increase caused by your very first shot is many times larger than the spread increase for subsequent shots. So you have to weigh this up when deciding whether to burst fire or not. Effectively, burst firing will control your maximum spread and the compound spread caused by firing multiple bullets. But if you're using a weapon that has a particularly bad first shot multiplier, then repeatedly encountering those difficult to control first few shots may well outweigh the benefit of burst firing. So when you're thinking about burst firing to increase your effective range and reduce your spread, your compound spread, you have to consider whether or not repeatedly encountering that first shot multiplier, that initial difficulty controlling your shots, is worth it. The next thing to talk about is recoil. Now, this is almost one and the same consideration when you talk about recoil. You have the first shot multiplier to consider, you have the compound recoil effect of every single bullet, and those effects are much the same. But what recoil does, rather than simply make your bullets deviate further from your aim every shot, is actually move your aim. So, looking down the sights again at that old tree, when I fire, you can see that recoil is pushing my gun up, and it's also making my red dot there chatter from left to right. There's two components of recoil. There's horizontal, left and right, which is random and not controllable. There's vertical, which is somewhat controllable. Although the amount of vertical recoil is random, it will make random jumps vertically. You know it's going to go vertical, so you can push your mouse forward and compensate for that vertical recoil to hold your aim on target. As I say, recoil suffers from the same compound recoil, the same as spread does, and the first shot multiplier, so it needs much the same consideration as those effects to spread. So, just a very quick summary to put it all together. Submachine guns, they are not as accurate as other weapons, but they suffer much less from hip firing and from movement than other class weapons, which in fact makes them better in those regards when doing that stuff. So they are very effective in close quarters. Compound spread and compound recoil you are going to suffer from when holding down your finger on that trigger and experiencing those lovely high rates of fire is a double-edged sword. You will lose accuracy and you will compound recoil effects, making it much more difficult to control. So you're going to have difficulties with distance ability unless you burst fire. But when you burst fire, you have to weigh up the effect of that first shot multiplier. I think that's all I have to say about submachine guns, peoples. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Leave me a thumbs up. If you did, leave me a thumbs down. If you must, please do leave me some comments. I love to hear your thoughts on these videos and ideas for new videos, especially if you make your own. So, cheers YouTubers. See you next time. So another thing to think about when you're considering the ranged ability of a submachine gun is the damage drop-off of the weapon. Now they're pretty much similar. They all begin to drop off around 10 meters and get to a minimum of about 40, where the damage is halved. So they are certainly intended to be restricted somewhat to closer range. The velocity is also slow. For a submachine gun, if you fire into the distance, you can see the effect of gravity is reasonably severe, but you are not going to be doing distance sniping with a submachine gun, however tempting it may be, unless perhaps you want to cause some suppression to help your buddies out, but that's not really what they're made for.